Indira Gandhi National Open University presents a program for the students of postgraduate diploma in Environment and Sustainable Development. Course code MED 001. The title of the program is Environment, Our Life Support System. The talk on the topic is given by Professor C.K. Varshney, former Dean, School of Environmental Sciences, Jawaharlal Nehru University. Let us listen to this program.
Environment is our life support system, because whatever we do and whatever we obtain is received from the environment, and therefore an understanding of the environment is essential for our successful survival and well-being. Now, first of all, let us say that what is environment? Now, this earth is blessed with a very unique features, and one of the unique features is its environment, which has enabled life to develop. Of all the celestial bodies, earth is the only place where life exists, and this is possible because the earth has very unique environment. Now, this environment is really responsible for the life to develop and flourish. The earth is finite. Now, this point should be kept in mind, that although the environment is enormous, in which we have very big freedom to use it and to really survive, but at the same time there are serious limitations which are imposed, because things are not infinite, they are finite and they are limited. As we see that the earth is very large, but again it has borders, and therefore there are limits. So I think the environment is important, and it is this feature of the environment which requires that we should treat the environment with a responsibility, and also we should really behave ourselves so that we do not spoil the environment on which our survival depends. Now, what is environment? It is the sum total of all living and non-living components, influences and events surrounding an organism, that is human beings. Now, anything and everything that surrounds us is a part of the environment. So we have got physical environment, we have got biological environment, we have got cultural environment, and that determines our action, and that determines our state of well-being. Having said that, let us examine the environmental components in little detail. The abiotic environment consists of, the most important is sunlight, which we receive from outside the earth and which gives us the energy. Then we have atmospheric gases, and these gases have a particular composition. And then we have got the temperature regime, which really controls the human activity, and then the water, which is the essence of life, and then the geological substratum, and finally this geological substratum, through the process of weathering and action of sun and the climate, gets converted and forms the soil, which is a slow process, and it is this soil which sustains the plant life. Now, this physical environment provides the conditions for the living organisms to survive, and the biotic environment therefore includes a vast variety of microorganisms, fungi, bacteria, viruses, then plants, green plants, flowering plants, and then the smaller plants like algae and so on. They do photosynthesis and contribute to the abiotic environment. And then various animals, from the small rats and rabbits to the animals like elephants, tigers, and which includes human being, which depends on plants. Now, all of them are very intimately connected, and this connection is very, very important, which really sustains and maintains the quality and the constants of the environment. Now, first of all, we must realize that the energy that we receive from sun is harvested by green plants through the process of photosynthesis, in which the plants take carbon dioxide from the atmosphere, water from the soil, nutrients from the soil, and their green pigment known as chlorophyll, which is present in chloroplast, converts the solar energy into chemical energy, and we get carbohydrates formed, which subsequently are transformed because of the intricate chemistry that the cell of the plant possesses into various forms, such as carbohydrates, starch, sugars, and so on. Now, all this is known as primary production. Now, these green plants are known as producers. They are consumed by herbivores, or we call them as secondary producers, such as a cow, and finally we get the milk or something like that. We can also think of a possibility where we have got a grass, then we have got a rabbit, then we have got a fox, which never eats grass but really preys upon the rabbit and things of that kind, and finally the fox is eaten up or is preyed upon by a top predator. Now, this kind of a relationship, in which we call eater and eaten relationship, is known as a food chain. Now, in nature there are many different food chains, and these are all interconnected in a very complex manner, and this kind of chains which are connected is known as food web. These are nothing but these are highways and byways through which the energy and material passes from one trophic level to the next trophic level. It is this kind of a web or the interconnection which also provides a great amount of resilience and great amount of stability to the ecosystem. Therefore, it is important to know that all the organisms which are present in the ecosystem, the microorganisms, the large animals, the soil microorganisms, the large herbivores, carnivores, green plants, they are all part of the system, and all of them are essential components, and it is all the working and the synchronous working of these organisms which really provides the sustainability and stability to the ecosystem function, which is part of your course. Now, the atmosphere has a certain composition which I was referring earlier. It has nitrogen, which you know is about 79%, then 20% is about oxygen, then we have carbon dioxide, which is a trace gas, 0.003% or 300 ppm as the standard textbooks describe. Then we have large amount of water vapor, then some trace gases, argon, neon, helium and krypton. Now, what you will find that we live in an ocean of nitrogen, but this nitrogen is absolutely non-reactive, and therefore we are unable to make use of it. However, it is only through the agency of certain microorganisms that we are able to fix this nitrogen, which makes it reactive, and we then use it through the agency of plants. Finally, it comes to us as protein, and therefore it is important for us. Now, to maintain this composition in a very standard and a constant form, active cooperation and coordination of all the living organisms is important. For example, carbon dioxide is fixed by green plants to form carbohydrates, sugars and so on. And finally, during the death and decay, and as well as during the process of respiration, this fixed carbon dioxide is released back. In this process, the necessary energy required by the organisms is obtained, and this is how they carry out their life function. The point that is to be noted in this is that the coordinated effects and the effort of plants in fixing and of other organisms which finally return this fixed carbon dioxide to the atmosphere as a carbon dioxide gas is very important and critical, and there is a balance, and this activity has to be balanced, otherwise all the carbon dioxide will either get fixed or all the carbon dioxide will get locked up as an organic matter. So I think microorganisms do a mighty job of releasing this carbon dioxide back into the atmosphere so that it can be reprocessed by the green plants, and therefore the food or the primary produce is available for the secondary consumers and animals and so on and so forth. So I think this composition of the atmosphere is maintained because we need it, and at the same time we contribute in maintaining its proper and right composition. Now, oceans are very large, and you know that 97% of the global water is present in oceans, which is salty, and we cannot make use of it. However, it is very important for us whether we live very close to the ocean or we live far away from the ocean. But all the same, the oceans are very important. They are giant complex ecosystems, extremely fine-tuned over billions of years of evolution. They drive climate and weather. The water gets evaporated from the ocean and then is carried away far field, which ultimately gets into the cloud formation, and finally we get the rainfall. So if the oceans are not there, I think the climate and weather perhaps not conducive for the life. Then the oceans generate over 70% of the oxygen in the atmosphere that we need for various purposes, for our own use as well as for the use of our machines. Because whenever you travel in a car or you drive a two-wheeler, you require certain amount of petrol or fuel or fossil fuel. In order to burn it, you need considerable amount of oxygen. So I think all this oxygen is obtained from the atmosphere, to which there is a great contribution is made by the tiny microorganisms or the phytoplankton. These are green algae which are present in the ocean. So I think we can see that although oceans are far away and very few people are able to colonize the oceans, or in fact except in ships and so on for a very short period of time, people are living on the oceans, but they contribute very significantly in maintaining the life support system of the earth. Now we come to an important aspect, which is also something that we must learn, that this ecosystem, which is consisting of living and non-living, which are very intimately connected and which are having an absolutely seamless system, this provides us lot of services. Now what are these services that we obtain from the ecosystem? You will find that ecosystem provides us four main categories of services: provisioning, regulating, cultural, and all these three are provided and are supported by supporting services, and we shall discuss each one of them in little detail to really see the contribution that the ecosystem provides for our well-being on this earth, not only for human beings but for all the living biota, including plants, animals, microorganisms. Now the provisioning services include food. There is no way to obtain food but from the nature, and it is all provided through a combination of factors which is contributed by the environment: the carbon dioxide, the sunlight, the water from the environment, that is from the soil, and then the plants with their green pigment known as chlorophyll present in the chloroplast really produce the food. There is no way that we can produce the food other than plants. Then the fiber, natural fibers like cotton and so on, are again obtained from the ecosystems in terms of cotton or in terms of plant fiber or in terms of animal fiber. Then fuel. Firewood is a very common example. Even the fossil fuel are nothing but the processed plant and animal material of the past, which we are now mining, refining and using for our purpose. Then the genetic resources of various types. Now these genetic resources are very critical and extremely important, and it is these which provide us different kind of fruits, plants, grains and so on, and also various types of other resources which we try to study and then make use of. For example, various types of medicines that we get are nothing but they are kinds of products which the microorganisms and other fungi are really able to produce and which we are making use of in order to really secure our health. Then fresh water. Now regeneration of fresh water and obtaining of fresh water is nothing but is an environmental phenomena. The water gets evaporated because of the heat, differential heating of the water, and it is this differential heating and cooling which really helps us to get the fresh water. Otherwise is not possible. There is no factory which produces water, but it is the nature which really makes the water circulate, and therefore we make use of water again and again, the water made available through the rain. Then all kinds of medicines. The health system that we really have developed is on the basis of the plants and animals which really provide lot of medicine and lot of herbal medicines and so on. In large village areas and other tribal communities, the only medical support system is based upon the herbal medicines that are available. In fact, many of the modern medicines, the allopathic medicines, the principal ingredients come from plants and animals to a very large extent. Now these are some broad provisioning services that we obtain from the ecosystem and from the environment. Now comes the regulating services. The air quality is regulated because of the activity of plants and animals and the microorganism in a very coordinated, in a very, very regulated manner. The climate regulation, that is the temperature of the earth, the place of the rainfall, the amount of rainfall, all these things are part of the climate regulation. The duration of the temperature regime and so on. Now the water regulation is again provided by the environment. How much water is going to really flow in which direction is all a matter which really topography, elevation determines. Then the disease regulation. For example, if we do not maintain the environment properly, then I think number of diseases come, and therefore it is a problem which really has to be tackled. But many of the diseases are really maintained and are regulated by the environment. Then the pollination. Many of the plants will not bear fruit unless the right type of pollinators are available and they are able to really pollinate. This is a kind of service that the ecosystem provides. Then water purification. All the time we use water in our homes, in our factories, which gets dirty, which we cannot use it. The purification is carried out by the soil as it passes through, percolates, and you will find that in the well and the aquifer has a very good quality water, which is drinkable quality water. Now this kind of service is again provided by the environment, that is the soil which is part of the environment. Then the ecosystem provides the cultural services. For example, cultural diversity. It is the environment which really determines as to what kind of poetry is going to be created. For example, the communities which live in desert will never be writing a poetry or will never have an imagination to write a poetry which really speaks of the lotus and the other aquatic system. For example, those who live in temperate areas will handicap to really imagine and write something where people are really taking bath openly in a running water and so on and so forth. So I think the cultural diversity as we see around is very, very clear. The kind of houses, the construction, the way of living is all determined by the environment. Kind of people and the kind of dress that people wear in the desert environment is entirely different than the kind of dress and people who are living in a very cold environment. Entirely different. I mean, they are using different kind of apparel, different kind of dresses. And those who live in the tropical jungles, they are absolutely using and utilizing a different kind of resources. Their cultural festivals are different, and many of our cultural festivals are really nothing but reflection of the seasonality of the environment, such as the Pongal in south, and then the Basant and the Baisakhi. They are nothing but an expression of the seasonal change which we celebrate in form of the kind of plant harvest and so on. Now the educational value. I think the environment gives us a lot of insight into the functioning and is a great educational value. Then the aesthetic value. Whenever we look at the natural environment, it is very pleasing and it helps us and it relieves us of the tension and so on and so forth. There have been large number of experiments and evaluation of the aesthetic value of the environment. It may not surprise you to know that the patients heal much better if in the hospital their bed faces the window which overlooks a natural vegetation or a bed of flowering plants. Then the recreation and ecotourism. I think it is no secret that whenever we go to a forest or whenever we go to a riverfront or to a coastal area, we will find that there is a great encouragement to really recreate ourselves. In fact, all these services recreate us and they really relieve tension. And ecotourism is largely an organized way to make use of these recreational facilities or recreational abilities or recreational features of the environment. People go to mountaineering, people go for surfing, people go for parasailing. These are all services which are possible only when we have this type of environment available. Now, the fourth is the supporting services. Now, what are these supporting services? Soil is not available off the shelf. There is no factory in the world which forms the soil. It is the natural process of weathering, which is a slow but a very, very important process of nature which really help us to get the soil and its fertility. Then the photosynthesis, that is how the solar energy is stored in the organic form or this carbohydrate and sugars. Now this can only be done through the process of photosynthesis, which is really governed by the environment and the environmental components which really form some of the basic raw materials to provide us the material or we are able to harvest in form of carbohydrate, in form of wood, in form of plant material and the biomass. Then the primary production, which reflects the same. Then the nutrient cycling. The amount of nutrients present are limited, and in fact they must cycle. That is, they are absorbed and utilized by plants to form their own bodies, which ultimately are given to the animals, and these finally must be unlocked and given back to the soil, and this is carried out by various saprophytes and microorganisms, a whole team, a large variety, a wide spectrum of these microorganisms participate in this process. And then the water cycling, which is a very important, because water must keeps on renewing for the life to sustain and for ecosystems to really flourish and to survive. All these are supporting services which are really responsible for the earlier three services about which we have just discussed. Now ecosystem services are very important, and how important are they will become very clear. In fact, it is very difficult to evaluate the value of the ecosystem services. However, with whatever little understanding that we have, and with great limitation, an attempt has been made to figure out and to compare that what we are able to do and what the nature is able to really provide. For example, the global annual gross production in the year 2000 was about 18 trillion US dollars. That's the total of the entire industrial community or the global community. Now, if we take the services provided by the ecosystem and compare, then we will find that the environment, in a broad sense, not very accurately, but whatever rough estimates that we can make, is an underestimate to a very great extent, is of 33 trillion. This 18 trillion of global annual production is not independent, but is entirely and totally dependent upon ecosystem services. And I think you can see the magnitude and the grandeur of the ecosystem and the environment in terms of providing these services to us. The industrial culture rests on and draws upon the environmental resources, and that becomes very clear that even if we take a very narrow economic view, we will find that the ecosystem services are really so precious and so important, though it is only a very limited and a very short-sighted evaluation of the ecosystem processes and the environmental services. It is no hesitation to say that there is no substitute to ecosystem services. There is no way that you can create rain. Of course, scientists are there who are ready to create some rain, but then they have to ultimately depend on the ecosystem and the environment, because the water vapor they cannot really create, and if they do, then it requires energy, and that much energy one doesn't have in the quantities of the fresh water that the earth receives. So I think ultimately we have to depend on the solar energy and the kind of topography and the kind of other surface features which really contribute for the waters to evaporate. There is no substitute to ecosystem services. This is a fundamental fact, and I think we must realize this. There is no way that we can really fix carbon in a manner that the plants do. It is possible, but at a tremendous cost, which is not possible to really sustain and to make use of. And therefore, entirely we have to depend on the services provided by the plants and the process of photosynthesis. There is no way that we can really disregard or we can divorce our environment. Our dependence is absolute and is increasing rapidly. As our requirement, as our population is increasing, I think our dependence on the environment is increasing in the same measure. Few facts will reveal this more vividly. If we see the population, history of population growth, then we will find that our population has been increasing rather rapidly during the last 300 years or so. And you will find that population now, which is more than 6 billion, is really a very large size and requires a lot of resources for sustaining and having a decent lifestyle. Now, if you look to the Indian population, you will find that from 1951 we were only 361 million, and now we are more than 1 billion, and I think we are increasing further. So you can see that how rapidly we have really built up our numbers, and in the same measure our pressure on the earth is increasing. We need more water, we need more land, we need more food, we need more housing, and we need more of everything. And therefore we must remember what I said, that everything is limited, environment is also limited. So in a limited space, unlimited and extrapolating our demands cannot really sustain. There is going to be a serious problem, and it is this kind of a conflict which really emphasizes that it is important that we should learn our environment and learn to manage it well, so that we can meet all our legitimate needs. In 1971, I think, and we take 2030, we will find that oil demand is going to double in the next 20 years. Now oil is limited, and every day it is becoming less and less. Now if we continue to really guzzle the oil and use the fossil fuel resources, the manner and the rate at which we are really using, I think the time is not very far when we will run out of them, and I think the whole fossil fuel based culture will collapse. And I think this is something which really makes us worry and gives a very serious challenge, which really makes us to think of alternative fuel and the non-conventional fuels and the renewable fuels. Now this is a kind of situation in which we are. At present, our dependence on oil is very great. In India, only 37% of the fossil fuel we are able to obtain, and rest we have to import. But I think when the fossil fuels will run out, there is no way that we can import, and I think all that really works on the fossil fuel must come to an halt unless we have really developed well in time suitable alternatives for our activities to continue. Otherwise everything will come to a standstill. The global life support system is in peril because of our pressure, both in terms of the number of people, in terms of our demand on the natural resources and the environment. The global population has increased threefold since 1930. As you have seen, very rapidly it has grown. Global economy has increased more than 15-fold since 1950. When we talk of global economy, means that we are increasingly at a rapid rate on a larger scale using the environmental resources. And when we are using environmental resources, at the same time we are creating huge amounts of waste gases, poisonous gases, waste water, poisonous water, as well as of many solid waste. And all this has to be accommodated nowhere, but the environment is the only place where we have to dump it. So I think our requirement from the environment and environmental resources is twofold. First, to obtain the resources that we need, and secondly, to really dump and discard all that what we don't need. And therefore, in both these situations, our demand is increasing, and therefore the environment is under tremendous pressure. Now, human impact on environment can be visualized from the fact that all possible indicators indicate that the humans are really putting great pressure on the environment, and the environment is suffocating and suffering. Human driven increase in the atmospheric carbon dioxide level is 100 ppm and is growing. As I mentioned, that carbon dioxide is a trace gas, but is very important in terms of determining the climate on the earth and the temperature regime of the earth, and it is increasing. And this increasing concentration of carbon dioxide really promotes the surface temperature of the earth, which really is very serious business, and about which I think you will be able to learn in this course. It really changes the climatic pattern, the climatic regime, and once the climatic regime changes, then I think the pattern of rainfall changes, and when the pattern of rainfall changes, then the distribution of plant changes, and when the distribution of plant changes, then it brings about serious changes in the ecosystem and the other living community. So I think these are very long-term, serious, irreversible kind of changes which are introduced by human-driven increase of carbon dioxide. Secondly, cereal consumption has doubled since 1970. The food grain consumption has increased because our population has increased. Now, it's a big question. How far such increase will be possible? Can we continue to increase our cereal harvest? It is a very, very big question. We need to cater for extra 75 million people every year, which are added to the human population. Can we continue to increase cereal production in the face of that larger and larger communities are really to be established, new towns has to be established, new roads have to be established, which are eating away our arable land. The cultivated fields are decreasing, the amount of cultivated area is decreasing, while our requirement for the food grain is increasing. So I think here is a very serious situation which we are faced with. Then the global fish catch, which really the oceans have a large reservoir, and I think it was thought that these reservoirs are unlimited. But I think we have come to a situation where the global fish catch increased from 1950 to 1997. Thereafter it declined, and it has never increased. Though our fishing effort has increased, our input in fishing has increased, but it has not increased. The other thing that has happened is that we are now going to fish deeper and deeper. Now the lower strata fish are very serious business, because it takes 20 years for the fishes in the deeper oceans to really mature and to get into reproductive phase. And if at all we get an adult fish, there is no wonder that this fish may be about 100 years old. So what we are really doing is that we are really depleting the oceans. And in fact, it will not be wrong to say that oceans have been emptied because of the stripping of the biotic resources for various purposes or for feeding the mankind. So I think our oceans are almost getting empty. Demand for water is also rapidly increasing, and I think there is no one in this country or anywhere in the world which is not really faced with the water scarcity. Water, which is an essential for life, not only for human beings, for all animals and for all plants and microorganisms, is becoming scarce because of our rapid use and because we are rapidly destroying the water quality through pollution and discharge of waste. The most rivers and lakes are dangerously polluted. The water cannot be used for drinking and not even for animal purposes, and therefore I think most of our water bodies are really becoming a source of health hazard, and therefore you will find that gastroenteritis and many other related problems are really nothing but an expression of the poor quality of water that the community is using. Now, waterborne diseases are rampant because of the pollution and because of the lack of sanitation around the human habitats. Now, loss of biodiversity is taking place at an alarming rate. That is, through deforestation and various other activities, we are really hitting hard on the living resources. First of all, we have finished a large amount of fishes. Now we have also finished the trees, and we have really deforested large areas. So I think habitat loss is one of the important causes for many organisms to really vanish, and this is really a very, as we have seen that the nature survives on the proper and synchronized food web, and if the components of the food web are really eliminated or their numbers are decreasing, then I think the food web is really not in a very healthy state. Now, to look into the dilemma of the growing population, that is our requirement and our lifestyle included, we find that what we need is a good air quality. We find we need a lot of arable land to provide food for all the growing numbers of the human family. We need good soil fertility so that crops can be harvested. We need enough water of good quality, both for agriculture as well as for human consumption. And we need biodiversity for maintaining the natural cycles, the nutrient cycles, and for maintaining the stability of the environment. All of them are decreasing, unfortunately, and is a serious alarm. What we don't need, and this is a reflection of our own actions, or irresponsible action I should say, that the air is getting polluted, the water is getting polluted, the soil is getting polluted. There are a large number of dangerous diseases which have come. Minamata disease, for example, because of the mercury pollution. And the wasteland is increasing. The soil is losing fertility and creating wastelands. These are nothing but sterile pieces of land where very little can be grown. And then the soil erosion. About 60% of the world's soil is suffering from one kind or the other problem. And all this is increasing. So what we don't want is increasing, and what we need is decreasing. And this is the dilemma that we are faced in the 21st century. And I think it's one of the biggest challenge to maintain the environment. I think the kind of problems that I have simply touched upon or introduced very clearly shows that environment is our life support system, and healthy environment is vital. And let us save it. It is for the present and the future generation that we must maintain the environment in a healthy state. I hope that this has given you some idea as to how and why we should really be worrying about the environment.
You were listening to a talk on Environment, our life support system. In this program are Professor C.K. Varshane, former Dean, School of Environmental Sciences, Jawaharlal Nehru University, Content Coordinators, Dr. Jaswant Sokhi and Professor Vijayshri, Producer P. Santosh Kumar. The program was produced by Electronic Media Production Center of Indira Gandhi National Open University.